All right, thanks again, Adriana. Here we are on the CalPADS home screen. You know that because you seem welcome. And we're going to demonstrate online maintenance student data population for Fall 1. All right. We have a pre-recorded version for the batch file demonstration. And today we're going to specifically focus on online maintenance. So with that, use the left navigation and go to online maintenance. And you can see student data and request SSID. Let's start with student data. All right, here's the student data maintenance screen. We have options here. Search by SSID, search by demographic slash request SSID, search by enrollment, and SSID match tool. And this is used just for matching and identifying students. So you would have the demographic student of a student who's newly enrolled into your LEA, and you don't have their SSID. You submit a file with their demographic information, their name, their birth date, so on and so forth, into the match tool, and CalPADS will give you a file to put back into your system, and it will identify if there's a match and what their SSID is. If there's multiple candidates, it will show you the multiple candidates and give you a score. Um, it's only used for matching students. A file submitted to the match tool will not post information, but you have to submit it into the match tool. Okay. If you submit an SENR file mistakenly into file upload, you will post potential records and have mismatches in mids. This functionality has a dedicated video from when it was introduced. So you can always look up SSID match tool on the CSIS training channel. Also, in our Fall 1 data population batch file demonstration, we show you how to use the match tool. All right, so let's look at search by enrollment. So here on the search by enrollment tab, we have to enter a school. And most likely you have to populate more information to narrow your results. This is just a simulation site, right? This is just um, the test environment, right? So if I go to the top, you can see non-production environment test. We don't have a lot of data here. So I'm going to click search, and all the students have come up that have ever been enrolled at CSIS Training Berkeley High. It's not practical if you're in a production environment because you are going to have probably more than 1,000 results. Most likely you will have to narrow your search. We don't have significant data. CalPADS will execute our search. This is a list of currently and previously enrolled students that you're searching. When you have newly enrolled students or you're trying to identify SSID for new students, this isn't an effective tool. What it is effective at is if you are looking at reports and your counts are off, you can verify who's enrolled at what school, at what grade. It's good for that, ensuring that each student is correctly enrolled at the school at the grade level. It's a good tool for that as well. Now, let's go to search by SSID. Let me refresh this screen. And so this is as it says. If you have a student's SSID, you can type it in. All right, we type in the SSID and click search. And here we have Adriana Fast. All right, it's always good to be fast. Fast is better than quick. All righty, so this will give you access to the student detail screen. And on the student detail screen is every element of the student's profile. So as I scroll down, you can see all the different record types CalPADS collects on the student. So there are records that are not relevant to your student. So like if your student is not a student with disability, the students with disability status, special education meeting plans and services will not have any data. If your student is not in grades 9 through 12, it's likely they will not have work-based learning or post-secondary status data. Not all students have offense and incidents, right? But your Fall 1 data coming from your student information system, all of your students will have a student enrollment. All of your students will have student information, which is the demographics and address. All of your students will have a student English language acquisition. You may not submit a CELA file or record for your student. If they have a established English language acquisition status that has not been changed, you don't submit new data unless there's a change. However, they will have a record. A student program is dependent if that student is eligible or participating in a program. So these are the files or the records that are coming from your student information system that we'll cover today. Student enrollment, demographic, address is part of student demographics, student English language acquisition, and the student program. All of those can be accessed on the student detail screen. I'm going to go back to the student data maintenance screen. Also, there's a shortcut for the search by SSID. Over here in the left nav, you can type in the SSID and click the arrow, and it's more direct. It's a faster search. You can do it from any screen. Now search for demographics. You can look up a student and request an SSID. Both require demographic information, and both will execute a search. Before you can request an SSID, CALPADS will do a search and identify if there are any potential matches. Student lookup just requires less information. I've populated 3 fields. I have a student whose name is Cherry. Well, I misspelled it. Let's try to spell it correctly. I have a student whose first name is Cherry, their last name is Red, and their gender is female. I didn't type in their birth country or their birth date. I can submit this minimal amount of data. Most of the time you have more data, and I always suggest using as much data as possible so you can make sure you get a match or the correct match. However, if you have a newly enrolled student from a homeless situation, they're unhoused, possibly your student has just enrolled and they're evacuating a fire or some kind of disaster, and you don't have all that information available, you can still enroll the student with the information you have, and you can identify some of that information if they've been previously enrolled in a California public school. So here you can see there are 4 potential matches for the student. So you do want to know the student's birth date. That would help narrow the match. It does help to know where that student was born. You can see this student was born in Georgia. The other 3 were born in California. And if you have the parent information, you can see that we have different names for our parents. Birth dates and grade levels vary as well. And then the previous school of attendance. If this isn't enough information, you can click the link by their name or the button that is a link by their name. And then again, at the student detail screen, not only do you have the current enrollment, you would see the entire enrollment history. You can drill down into the demographics. If you click open, you can see the entire demographic record. You can see if there's information for both parent guardians, you can see it here. If this student enrolls and the parent's name is Cherry Bing and Cherry Sweet, we can enroll that student. You have their last address that was submitted. So you have access to all that information. Let's go back. Now let's look at request SSID. You can see that the information was pre-populated. Same last name, first name, and gender. And I'm going to click search. This is the information that pulled up from our previous search. Let's click the search button. And it didn't execute. You can see that the birth date is also required for the student. And the student's birthday is 6/14/2016. The system has found 2 results. Alternatively, you may create a new SSID. So if you have results, pause on creating a new SSID. Make sure you review your matches. Students should only have 1 SSID in CALPADS. Occasionally, there are mistakes. Students do get assigned 2 SSIDs, and they're called multiple identifier anomalies. They're much harder to resolve than if we just assign the appropriate SSID for our students. So I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure your student does not have a record in CALPADS. Before you assign a new SSID, do a proper search. to see if there's already one that exists, regardless of grade level. Don't make the assumption. Now, here's the difference in the results. You see the match score? When you click request a SSID, CalPADS is going to try to assist you. It's telling you this student is a 96.96 match. This student is a 95.39 match. Based on the information provided, this student has a higher match score. The biggest difference is the birth date, 6/14/2016. The one that's a lesser match is 06/01/2016. So if I had a typo or made a mistake, this lower match score could be the student. That's why you want to do your due diligence and look at the student's demographic information, the birth year, birth state, parent's name, sometimes previous address, previous enrollments. You want to make sure that you can find corresponding information to what you have locally. And so if you were requesting an SSID, you have a batch of new students that come in and you're going to request their SSID, you can go there directly from online maintenance to request SSID. And let's say my student's name is Pagu Lion, right? Middle initial is K. He's a boy. Gender is male. And that student is a kindergartner. So let's do 2026. Let's go back to 2021. 2021. Let's do August 1st, 2021. Student was born in the US and the student was born in California. Based on the criteria that I've entered, there are no matching students. I can reasonably assume that's correct because it's a kindergarten. I can't always assume that though, right? Sometimes there are pre-enrollments. So the student could have been expected to enroll at a different school. Sometimes there are pre-K programs. Students can enroll in advance of kindergarten. So you never know. You can't look at a student's grade level and assume it's the first time in a California public school. But because I do not have a match, I'm going to go ahead and create a new SSID. Okay, so from here, I have a brand new student. You can see that the search criteria was already pre-populated. If that student has a nickname, like K-Man, and a preferred last name, for whatever reason, there's an alias last name or preferred last name. He wants to be honest, not lying, right? We would enter that information, right? There could be custody situations, child safety situations where their preferred name that goes on documents is different from their birth certificate name. It could just be a preference, right? It's California, it's 2026. Students change their names all the time for various reasons, right? We have preferred name. There's also alias name, alias first name. These fields are not required to enroll the student but can be populated. For testing, a lot of times this information, the preferred name is used for information that goes sent to the student, but it's not required for enrollment. Just demonstrating and talking about the fields. The reporting LA is associated to my account, but I do have to populate the school of attendance. The student goes to Emerson Elementary. Every LEA has a district enrollment. So here you can see CSIS Training Berkeley Unified 998152. That's the same as my LEA code. Students sometimes are enrolled at the district if they are in homeschool or home study programs. There are scenarios where you have students with disabilities who receive services at home, like pathology, speech pathology. They don't attend school, they just are receiving services at home. They have to be enrolled. Any student enrolled in special education that's in a special education system has to also be enrolled in CalPADS, okay? So that's when you'd have a district enrollment. Some students attend MPS schools. Every LEA has access to this group code. However, if you say a student's at an NPS school, you have to identify the NPS school of attendance code. Every certified NPS school has its own school of attendance code, but those are the unique scenarios. Again, every LEA has an NPS school group code and a district enrollment code. This student is enrolled at Emerson Elementary and is not attending an NPS school. So your local student ID is required, but it must come from your student information system. For the purpose of the demonstration, I'm going to make this up. However, the birth city, you can verify that, right? That comes from your information. The student was born in the state's capital. Now you have to enter enrollment status. Primary enrollments are the majority of the enrollments in CALPADS. If you are providing the majority of a student's instruction, they need a primary enrollment within your LEA. If you are providing special education services, more likely than not, they're going to have a primary enrollment as well. Secondary enrollments are not for special education. In fact, you cannot submit a students with disability with a secondary enrollment. It is not appropriate. Secondary enrollments are for supplemental instruction. Usually that supplemental instruction may be within your district but a different school than their primary school. So you might have a middle school student going to the high school or an elementary school student attending middle school for accelerated courses. That's a scenario in which you would have a secondary enrollment. Short-term enrollments are for educational option schools, typically associated with discipline, uh, juvenile halls, country day schools, continuation schools. Those type of schools are allowed to use short-term enrollment, but only if the enrollment period is 30 days or less. Once it exceeds 30 days, it should be updated to a primary enrollment. A primary enrollment and a short-term enrollment can overlap. They can coexist as long as that short-term enrollment's not 30 days. Students get in trouble. Some students have challenging environments. Students may have to go to a court school for a period of 2 weeks. You don't have to disenroll that student. They can return and it minimizes your workload. However, if that student is going to the court school for 31 days, you're going to have to disenroll that student and re-enroll them with the new start date because that 30-day enrollment, even if it stays 30 in CalPADS, is going to be treated like a primary enrollment. It's going to trigger uh, anomalies. You're going to lose ownership of that student's record. It's going to revert to the short-term enrollment that's treated like a primary enrollment. So you want to make sure that you communicate with your county and the court schools. And when you have a student who might be highly mobile or going in and out, that you guys have a plan in place. Communication is always key. Last but not least, 50, non-ADA enrollment status. Remember, the CalPADS code set is your friend. This is the title, not the definition. The definition would describe its use. The title is just concise. The name of the code is concise. There are a lot of different scenarios in which students may be enrolled with a non-ADA enrollment. However, this enrollment status is specific to those students receiving special education instruction that are either infants with the IFSP or enrolled at a private school and they are on the ISP. If they're a school age student, right, TK through 12, they're probably going to be a 50 if they're at a private school. If they're under 3 and they're receiving services, they're going to be a 50 and they're going to be on the IFSP. There is not a scenario that you should have a student in your special education data system that is not also in CalPADS. Regardless of services, regardless of age, every student in your special education data system should be enrolled in CalPADS. The nuances of the enrollment you have to master, but we're here to help you. Reach out. We can point you to the document that the special education data team provides. We could put you in contact with the special education data team if your scenario is so particular that we can't answer it ourselves. But as a rule, 50 is reserved for students with disability. They're either on the IFSP and they're under 3, or they're school age, but they're at a private school. So we'll go to grade level now. We have all the grade levels available. However, the retired grade levels are here. Toddlers are retired grade level. UE, ungraded elementary, is retired. Ungraded secondary is retired. Ungraded unknown is retired. Okay. However, preschool, infant, and transitional kindergarten are eligible grade levels. This student is a kindergartner. The enrollment start date. This is the day that the student first attends school. If you're doing a pre-enrollment, this is the day you first expect the student to attend. You can see that today is August 11th. I'm going to pre-enroll the student for August 17th, 2026. The rest of the information is largely for exits. We're not going to cover that. However, student school transfer code is conditionally required if you're at a district of choice. Every student that enrolls at a district of choice has to have a district of choice transfer code. If you don't know whether or not your district is district of choice, CalPADS will give you an error when you try to enroll the student. Don't worry about it. We got you covered. Other than that, if your student is attending a county school, so if you work at a COE, most likely you're going to have to say why the student is attending the COE, and then you're going to tell us the district of geographic residence. That's simply the 7-digit code associated to that district of geographic residence. Okay? Those fields are conditionally required. I'm going to go ahead and post this record. All right, so we have been assigned job ID 2904767, has been submitted for processing. To view the status of the job, please click File Submission. I'm going to right click and open a new tab. And that's going to take me to the View Submission, right? You can also get there using the left navigation and clicking View Submission. So as you can see, the record has posted. You see file status? Sometimes it will say, processing, being parsed, whatever. It will give you an indication where your file is at in the process. If it says posted, I know it passed. If there's information down here that prevented it from posting, we'll get error information. Unfortunately, records that post, we don't get any information for. So how do I know this newly assigned student's SSID? Well, there's a few ways you can find it. If you're submitting records for 7 students, there's an extract, a SSID extract, where you can find the newly assigned SSIDs. That's again in the demonstration of batch file. But using online maintenance, right, we can go back to student data and we could do a demographic search, right? All right, and here's our student, right? So I have the SSID. I can put this in my student information system and I'm done, right? I'm finished. Students enrolled. Absolutely not. We have to complete the student profile. And so using online maintenance, I click the name link and here we are on the student detail screen. I can see the enrollment record. And CalPADS will always create a shell demographic record. It's not complete. You will trigger certification errors if you don't complete this record. Okay. Um, Perhaps there are already a DD for this student. Who knows? So let's look at the data discrepancies, right? I'll right click, open a new tab. Here we are. Academic year 26-27, fall 1. Click apply filters. All your data discrepancies will come up that are fatal. And then I suspected that this would trigger, so I clicked the 2 and I have the result. And this is our student here. Invalid student race code missing indicator and race code combination. So here's the record that's triggering the error. And you can see that CalPADS created a shell record, but and it's the enrollment record. It's not, it says record type enrollment. So this student has been enrolled. Here's the enrollment record. And because this enrollment record exists, the student information system must be completed. This is a fatal error. I could not certify if I don't address it. So again, you want to complete your data population before you look at your errors, because in the course of completing your students' profiles, you're going to resolve a lot of errors that trigger. So under the demographics record, I want to open this record. I want to edit the existing record. If I add a new record, it's going to be subsequent to this record, and this record is going to go unaddressed and still trigger an error. So I want to open the existing record because that's where the data discrepancy lies, and finish populating the information. Again, we went over all the information at the top. This came from the student enrollment screen. If I've made a mistake in the name, I can change it here and post. If I've made a mistake in the birth date, I can update this birth date and post the record. I cannot do both at the same time. So keep that in mind. You can update the name, you can update the birth date. You can't do both at the same transaction. And you can't do it through a file submission. You have to do those corrections online. All right, so enrolled in US less than 3 years cumulative indicator. This is required for all your foreign-born students. Because Pagu was born in the US, it's not required. It doesn't hurt if I populate yes, but if I don't, it's okay. I don't have to populate it because it's not required. This information is used to identify those students who could be Title III eligible immigrants. Students that are identified as yes, that their birth country is something other than the United States or Puerto Rico, and those students who are 3 through 21 looking at their birth date. Those are going to be automatically eligible. They're going to show up on reports. We don't care about citizenship or residency. This is about education and curriculum. So American students born overseas that took their primary education or part of a different culture, we want to see how they're transitioning to US school system, right? That's why this information is collected. So a Title III eligible immigrant may not be an immigrant in the sense that we're used to. It's automatic. You just answer the question. Has that student been enrolled in school less than 3 cumulative years? Yes or no? Where was the student born? How old is that student? Simple as that. Nothing to consider, nothing to question. The initial U.S. school enrollment date is used for testing, right? So what is the first date the student began kindergarten or TK, transitional kindergarten, if they were? If they went, if they were at a state that didn't offer TK and their first year of public school was kindergarten, you enter that. Preschool, we're not considering that. So if it don't give us a preschool date, it's their kindergarten or TK date. This helps identify students who should not be tested. So ethnicity and race is required. If a student does not provide that information, we have an indicator, Hispanic ethnicity indicator. Is the student Hispanic? Yes or no, right? Ethnicity missing indicator. If they don't provide an answer, it's missing. Yes. That's how you submit that, right? It's one ethnicity question. Is the student Hispanic? Yes or no? They didn't tell me. Okay. The ethnicity indicator is yes. That's the same. I know we have not applicable. This is not a valid entry. It could be removed. You have to populate something. Okay. And if you do say yes, the student's Hispanic, the indicator has to be no. It's not missing. We've indicated the student is yes. If you say no, the missing indicator has to be a no. Right? So I just don't want you to be fooled because you see not applicable, right? Wonder why your record doesn't post. So the first question is the student Hispanic? Yes or no? Is the ethnicity indicator missing? No, it's not. Let's go to race. Race code missing indicator. Do we know the student's race? If they say they're not providing that information, which they have the right to not provide, yes, I don't have the race. Oh no, they told us. Okay, then it's not missing. You're going to populate no. Again, this is required. Not applicable is misleading. Now, the first race code has to be populated. It doesn't matter what it is. They don't have to identify if they have a preference or whatever. If they provide more than one race, this code has to be populated somewhere, right? So, uh, other Asian, white, black, Filipino, and Samoan. His entire lineage is represented. What a proud family, right? That's okay. We'll take all of this. As long as race code 1 is populated, you're good to go. Parent guardian information. Again, you have to tell us if a parent has graduated high school or not. If they're not a high school graduate, it doesn't matter what their situation is. Straight A student, parents are millionaires, right? They're streamers on YouTube. They're making buku money, more money than you can imagine. That student is going to be considered social economically disadvantaged. That's just the rule, right? If they say we're not high school graduates, regardless of that student's opportunity, culture, education, that's what we're going to categorize them in. All right. So just understand that. Decline to state doesn't have the same result. It's just decline to state. Hagu lion. So our student's a junior, a third, or something. All right. Now we're going to populate the information for the mother. We got the dad, Pagu lion, and we're going to populate the information for the mom. And the mom's name is Hagulina lion. Two parents are not required. It could be a parent or guardian. So who's ever enrolling the student is expected to populate this information. All right, so we've populated the parent guardian information here. If you populate any field for parent guardian 1, all 3 fields have to be populated. We have it, so we're going to populate it. And we've populated the mother's information as well. Pagulina Lion, and she's a college graduate. Moving on. Student's address. This is the address they use to enroll. So we're going to use 675 Houston Road. I know you guys are reading that and it says Houston, but there are states in the United States that say Houston. I lived in Houston County a long time ago. Residential city. The student lives in Berkeley now. All right, so I've completed the address. Notice this is a nonsensical zip code. That's okay. Long as there's 5 digits, CalPADS is fine with it. I'm only telling you that to stress the validations, right? I don't want you to put ridiculous zip codes in. I'm doing that for training. But the onus is on you to do your due diligence to make sure this is correct. We're not going through USPS Postal Service and validating this address. It would be nice, but we're not doing that. So if you make a mistake in the address, it could affect your state level matching, identifying that student for direct certification, maybe as a foster youth student. It could affect theoretically Sunbucks. It also will affect if that student, again, is communicated appropriately from outside vendors, such as SBAC, right? We have CAS testing and LPAC testing. So those are things to consider. You want to make sure that you're correct. Mailing address is not required. However, if there is a mailing address, populate it so that, again, this information can be directed. Right? So for CAS testing, if there's a mailing address, that's the address that would be on the envelope. I'm going to post the record.